If you've ever thought about downsizing, but immediately felt overwhelmed just thinking about where to start, you are absolutely not alone. Because for most people, the idea of downsizing starts simple until they actually sit down and try to figure out what that even means. And then it becomes, do we declutter first? Do we look for a new home first? Do we sell first? Do we buy first? Do we start packing? Do we need a storage unit? We need a therapist. And honestly, I get it. Because for a lot of homeowners, it's not the move itself that feels overwhelming. It's the fact that they have no clear starting point. And in this video, I'm going to help you with exactly that. One of the most common things we hear from homeowners here in Volusia County is this. We know we need to do something, we just don't know where to begin. And that's usually the exact point where people freeze. Not because they're not serious, not because they're lazy, not because they aren't ready. They freeze because the process feels too big in their head. And honestly, that makes total sense because if you've been in your home for 20, 25 years, maybe even longer, you're not just talking about moving. You're talking about years of belongings, years of routine, years of memories, years of we'll deal with that later. And then one day, later shows up. And suddenly downsizing feels like this giant mountain. But here's the good news. It doesn't have to be that way. And more importantly, you do not need to do everything at once. That's where most people go wrong. So let's start with the real question. Why does downsizing feel so overwhelming in the first place? The answer is actually pretty simple. Because people are trying to solve too many decisions at the same time. That's what creates overwhelm. You're trying to think about the house you're in now, the house you might move to, what to do with all your stuff, timing the move, where you'll live, what you'll keep, what you'll let go of, whether now is the right time, and how not to make a mistake. That's a lot. And your brain hates a lot. So what does it do? It says, that's too much. Let's not deal with it today. And that's exactly why people stay stuck. Not because they don't want change, but because they've made the process feel like one giant problem instead of a series of small, manageable steps. And that right there is the shift. Because downsizing doesn't get easier when you feel ready. It gets easier when you have a clear plan. Now, if there's one mistake I see over and over again when people start thinking about downsizing, it's this. They start with the stuff. And I get why, because the second you think about moving, your brain immediately goes to, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with all this stuff? And now suddenly you're staring at closets, cabinets, the garage, the attic, the guest room that hasn't been a guest room for 8 years. And before you know it, you're mentally exhausted before you've even made a real decision. But here's the truth. The stuff is not the first step. It feels like the first step, but it's not. Because if you start with the stuff before you have clarity, you're making emotional decisions in a vacuum. And that's why people burn out fast. They start sorting things before they even know where they're going, what kind of home they want, how much space they'll actually need, or what this next chapter is supposed to look like. And that's backwards. When you do it backwards, everything feels heavier than it needs to. So if you shouldn't start with the stuff, where should you actually start with downsizing? You start with lifestyle. That's the first step. Before you think about boxes, furniture, storage units, or real estate websites, you need to ask yourself, what do I actually want my life to look like next? That is the question. Not what can we afford? How many bedrooms should we have? What should we list for? Start with lifestyle. Ask yourself, do I want less maintenance? Do I want everything on one level? Do I want to be closer to my family, grandkids? Do I want a smaller yard or no yard? Do I want to travel more easily? Do I want fewer stairs, fewer projects, fewer things to keep up with? That matters so much more than people realize. And once you get clear on your next lifestyle, everything else starts to make more sense. And this is exactly what we walk people through all the time. Because once someone stops thinking only about the next move and starts thinking about the life they want next, everything changes. That's when stress starts to drop. That's when the process becomes manageable. And that's when people go from overwhelmed to clear. So let me make this really practical for you. If you're wondering where to start with downsizing, here are 3 things I would figure out first before doing anything else. Number 1 is, what kind of lifestyle do you want next? Now, I know we just talked about this, but it is the foundation. If you don't know what you want life to feel like next, you can't make good decisions about the move. This is where people sometimes surprise themselves because they think they need another house. But what they actually want is less responsibility, more convenience, less upkeep, and more freedom. And those are not the same thing. Number two, what are your options financially? Now, this is a big one. A lot of homeowners here in Volusia County are in a much stronger position than they realize. If you've owned your home for a long time, there's a very good chance you've built up a lot of equity over the years that can open up a lot of possibilities. Sometimes people assume downsizing won't work for them until they actually sit down and look at what their current home may allow them to do. And then suddenly what felt impossible starts looking doable. That's why getting clarity around your options matter early. Not because you need to make a move right away, but because information creates relief. Guessing creates stress, while clarity brings confidence. Now, number three, what timeline actually makes sense for you? And this is huge because not everybody needs to move in 30 days. Not everybody should. Some people are 3 months out. Some are 6 months out. Some are just starting to think about it. And that's okay. The mistake people make is assuming they need to have urgency before they have clarity, and you don't. In fact, some of the best decisions happen when people give themselves a little breathing room, because then the process becomes thoughtful instead of reactive, and that's always better. And this is really what it all comes down to. Downsizing gets easier the moment you stop trying to figure it all out and start following a plan. That's it. Because a plan gives your brain something it loves: order. A plan turns "this is too much" into "okay, I can do this." And that's why people who feel the least overwhelmed in this process are almost never the people with the least stuff. They're the people with the most clarity, and that's the difference. Because when you know what matters, what comes first, what can wait, and what actually applies to your situation, you can stop spiraling. And honestly, that's one of the biggest things Cindy and I help people with. Not pressure, not pushing, not making it feel bigger, just helping people break it down into the next right step. And once that happens, everything feels lighter. And I'll tell you what most people really need when they start thinking about downsizing. It's not motivation. It's not a checklist with 47 things on it. It's not somebody saying, "Come on, let's go, time to pack." What most people actually need is this: permission to not do it all at once. That's it. Because when people realize they don't have to solve the whole move today, they don't have to declutter the whole house this weekend, they don't have to know exactly where they're going before they start, they can relax. That's when they can finally move forward, not from panic, not from pressure, but from clarity. And that's always where good decisions come from. So if you've been thinking about downsizing and every time you think about it, you immediately feel overwhelmed, that does not mean you're not ready. It probably just means you need a better starting point, and that's okay. You don't need to figure out the whole move today. You just need to get clear on what comes first. And if you're here in Volusia County and you want help thinking through your options, your timing, or what this next chapter could look like for you, reach out. Send us a message, give us a call or a text. We're happy to help you take the first step. Simple, clear, and no pressure. And if this kind of content is helpful for you, make sure to subscribe, because I'm going to keep making videos just like this to help owners make smart, low-stress decisions about what comes next.